The Legend of El Dorado. It was on the 5th day of our expedition that I began to lose all hope, and think that we would never find El Dorado, the ancient capital of the Chibcha people ruled by King Zipper, where everything was made of gleaming, glorious gold. Everyone knew about it, but no one knew where it was or how to locate it. A secret city that no one could find. Just imagine. Of course, we all dreamed of finding it, of discovering all that gold and having more wealth than we knew what to do with. But that was it. El Dorado was just a dream that everyone had. Except my brother Louis, that is. My crazy, funny, and hot-tempered brother who would get an idea in his head and nothing and no one would make him change his mind. Until the next weird and wonderful thing came along. Which is precisely how I came to find myself halfway up a mountain, cursing Louis and his madcap plan as I tried to light our campfire in the middle of a ferocious rainstorm. I was exhausted, hungry, and a very long way from home. My feet hurt. The mosquito bites that covered my arms and legs itched terribly, and I was in no mood to hear him talk about what he would do with his share of the El Dorado gold. The rain finally stopped, and I coaxed the fire into life and began heating up the last of the watery soup I had in my bag. As soon as it was hot, we slurped it down with our last scraps of stale bread, reveling as its warmth spread from our full bellies to the rest of our cold, wet bodies. The jungle around us was loud with the chirp, hiss, click, and hum of insects. I ached and I yearned to sleep in a warm bed. "Louis, we need to turn back tomorrow and head back to the village," I said, as I finished my meal. "It's been 5 days now, and nothing we have seen resembles what is on that stupid map. El Dorado is just a made-up story. I'm scared and tired, and I want to go home." Louis looked at me over the top of his food bowl, his brown eyes bright with excitement and enthusiasm. "We're going to find it tomorrow. I promise you. I just know it. I have this feeling in my bones, and it tells me that tomorrow is the day," he said, flashing me one of his infectious smiles. "Tomorrow we'll find El Dorado, and we will be rich." I knew that arguing with him would never work. For as long as I can remember, arguing with my twin brother always ended up the same way. He would smile, that smile, and talk me round to his point of view, and that would be that. "Besides," he said, "what do we have to go back to?" Well, Louis was right, of course. He always was. Our father had died in the wars when we were just babies, and on our 12th birthday, our heartbroken mother had joined him. With no one else to take us in, we were left to fend for ourselves, which meant for the last 2 years we'd been doing any and all jobs and tasks we could find in return for a few coins here, a hot meal there, and if we were lucky, somewhere warm to sleep for the night. Who would miss 2 skinny, dirty orphans? My brother had a good point. It's much easier to keep walking away when you have nothing to go back to. I sighed. "Show me the map again, Louis. Show me where your El Dorado is." He grinned, gave me a wink, and sat down next to me. From his canvas bag, he pulled out the frayed piece of parchment that over the last few weeks had become the most important thing in our lives. Louis had first showed it to me when he came back from working for the old woman who lived down by the river's edge. Some villagers said she was a lunatic who turned into a man-eating jaguar during the full moon. Others said she could see and speak to the spirits of those long dead. Most people crossed themselves when they heard her name and walked quickly away. We just knew her as the smelly old woman with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes. When the old woman gave the map to me, she said it would lead us to where we would find joy and happiness. Louis reminded me of when he was just a boy. "It will take us where we're meant to be," said Louis. "We must find El Dorado." I stared at the map and for the 1,000th time wondered why Louis had agreed to do a long day's work repairing the old woman's fishing nets in exchange for an old map. Well, when I say map, I mean a rag of yellow old paper covered in a few lines and squiggles that, no matter how hard I looked at them, looked more like a toddler's drawing rather than the key to the most valuable place in the world. Louis, who had quizzed the old woman at length about the map, said the key was to find a star-shaped mountain lake, whose ice-cold and crystal-clear waters were fed by a cascading waterfall which tumbled into the north side of the lake. "So El Dorado is by the Star Lake?" I asked Louis. "That can't be right. Someone would have found it by now. It doesn't make any sense." Louis looked at me and frowned. "I know, but this is the truth." I looked at my brother and smiled. "Well, we'll find out tomorrow, that's for sure, but for now I really need to sleep." We unrolled our blankets on the dry ground at the base of a tall pecan-nut tree, lay down and immediately fell asleep. We woke at sunrise the next morning, packed up our small camp, and after checking the small compass Louis kept in his pocket, headed west with the sun warm on our backs. The ground quickly rose beneath our feet, and soon we were climbing up a narrow ridge that was steep enough to make us gasp for breath. Suddenly, the ridge leveled out, and we stumbled onto a small round clearing with a magnificent view of the lush green valley below. We stood side by side, catching our breath and taking in the beautiful scene. "There! There it is!" shouted Louis suddenly. "Star Lake! We've done it! That's where El Dorado is!" I followed his outstretched finger and saw it too, a perfect star-shaped lake in the deep valley below that sparkled and glinted in the sun. I laughed out loud and excitedly hugged my brother. "Let's go find that gold," I grinned. It took us the rest of the morning to descend into the deep valley and across to Star Lake. It was hard work, but the thought of what lay ahead of us kept us going. As we reached the tip of the north of the lake, we heard the roar and thunder of falling water. "The waterfall!" gasped Louis excitedly. "It's the waterfall!" Sure enough, as we rounded the next bend in the lake, we saw a towering wall of tumbling water plunging from the mountainside above. Louis pulled out our map, but as he studied it, his smile turned into a frown. "It makes no sense. The map says El Dorado should be right here by the waterfall." I took the map from him and looked at the waterfall, and then back at the map. I felt deflated and cheated. So there was no golden city? My dreams of finding peace and happiness had turned into a nightmare. We were destined to be poor, unloved orphans and spend the rest of our lives working every waking hour just to stay alive. I was crushed. I sat down on the sandy bank of the lake and began to cry. Louis sat next to me and put his arms around my shoulders. "Don't cry. Please don't. We'll be fine, I promise," he said softly. I looked up at him and then at the waterfall. At first, I thought it was the tears in my eyes tricking me, but I thought I caught the glimmer and glow of something golden in the tumbling waters. I blinked hard and looked again. "Wait, Louis, can you see that?" I shouted. Louis squinted at the waterfall. He saw it too. El Dorado was hiding right in front of our eyes, behind the waterfall. The old woman's map was right. We had found what we were looking for. Our overwhelming joy was immediately replaced with disappointment and frustration. How on earth were we supposed to get to the other side of the waterfall? The torrents of falling water created a shield that was as thick and solid as a fortress door. Suddenly, Louis sprang to his feet and did a little dance. "I've got it! We have to swim underneath the waterfall to get to El Dorado." He grinned as he started taking off his shoes and shirt. Once again, he was right. We stuffed our clothes and shoes into our bags and hid them in a clump of dense grass near the water's edge, before plunging into the cool, clear water. It took us 3 attempts before we could hold our breaths for long enough to dive deep beneath the waterfall's turbulent waters and swim to the other side. We both popped up, spluttering and gasping for air, but we had done it. We found ourselves floating in a small, calm underground pool with a high roof of smooth rock. A golden beach gleamed beneath the blue skies. As we neared the shore, we could feel the sand beneath our feet, and warming sunshine poured down from above. And there, in front of us, was El Dorado, the city of gold. We had entered a magical world, hidden behind the waterfall. Everywhere we looked were the most amazing golden houses, gardens, parks and playgrounds. There were enormous trees covered in the brightest colored blossoms, stunning fountains that sprayed water high into the sky, and golden paths that wound their way through ponds, orchards and lawns. Brightly colored parrots, plump doves, darting hummingbirds and toucans swooped down and filled the air with their song. Louis and I struggled to take in all the color and beauty. We had never seen anything like it in our lives. I suddenly spotted a large group of people making their way towards us, all dressed head to toe in golden fabrics that glinted in the sun. At the front of the crowd of people, which seemed to get bigger before our eyes, was the tallest and fiercest-looking man I had ever seen. He held the hand of an equally tall and elegant woman. They both wore impressive golden crowns, and their bejeweled cloaks swept down to the ground. "That's King Zappi, the ruler of El Dorado, and his wife, Queen Adamira," I whispered to Louis. The royal couple bore down on us, and I instinctively hid behind Louis, who squared his shoulders, put his hands on his hips, and tried to look as brave as he could. As the king and queen and their followers stood in front of us, an amazing change took place. The king and queen's faces split into the most joyous smiles, and they threw back their heads and laughed long and loud in delight. "You are finally here," roared King Zappi. "Welcome to El Dorado. Welcome to our beautiful city of gold. We are so pleased you made it. Aren't we?" He turned to the buzzing crowd behind him, which erupted into shouts of joy and laughter. A band started to play a happy song, and immediately everyone started to dance in perfect time. I stared at Louis, my mouth wide open, and then gaped at King Zappi and Queen Adamira, who stepped close to us and held out their hands. "You have the map?" asked the king kindly. "I told one of my angels to give it to you. You see, once a year we ask one of our angels to give this very special gift to someone they think belongs in El Dorado. And this year," he smiled, "it is you two. You are home." Come now, laughed Queen Adamira, taking each of us by the hand and leading us through the jubilant crowd. Let me show you to your new home and family. Tonight we will have the most wonderful party, and you will be our guests of honor. We will dance and laugh all night to celebrate your safe arrival. Everyone is so excited to finally meet you. If you're ready to start your new life, then let's not waste a second. Let's go. I turned to Louis and hugged him as tightly as I could. We are going to live the rest of our lives in a city made of gold, I whispered in his ear. But our new lives are going to be rich in so many other different ways.